one, my name is Shaka Shakur. I'm a conscious citizen of the Republic of New Africa. Been running the New African Independence Movement. Been incarcerated as of January for 23 consecutive years for attempted murder on a Gary police officer that was trumped up charges and wrongfully convicted. I'm currently being held in this was convicted in the state of Indiana. Currently being held in domestic exile in the state of Virginia, primarily because of my political activities and influence throughout the Indiana Department of Correction system, where I have altogether over 30 years of incarceration or serving time. Um, I've done extensive tours in supermaxes and control units, both in Indiana and the state of Wisconsin. Having been to the Supermax Correctional Institution in Boscobel, Wisconsin, and one of the first prisoners to be paroled from there. So I pretty much, to some extent, grew up in control unit prisons and Supermax prison. I first went to prison at the age of 16, serving 15 years and a 30-year sentence. Um, so although I have not been to Red Onion Supermax, I've not been to Wallace Ridge Red Supermax. However, the conditions of confinement at Red Onion, the culture at Red Onion, etc., you can find anywhere within the country that has a Supermax, particularly those that's kept or built in rural areas. Whether it's the Shoe at Wabash Valley Correctional Institution in Indiana, whether it's the Supermax in Westville, Indiana, Maximum Control Complex / Westville Control Unit, whether it's Pelican Bay out in California, whether it's the McAllister Unit in Oklahoma, whether it's the underground prison, the Supermax in Minnesota. It's the same conditions, the same culture, and the same slave breaking mentality, or we're going to break your will, based on the science of behavioral modification and repression and oppression, to break down a prisoner's will mentally, physically, and as the prison crash state rebuild that image and what have you in their own interests. And that's pretty much what Red Onion is. They send guys to that particular facility to break their will and break their spirit. And it's not, and although prisoners of color suffer the brunt of the racism and oppression, but it's all prisoners. They have an anti-prisoner mentality, and what we don't understand is how is it that these atrocities of abuse can go on for decades in this particular region, what they call the Southwest region, whether it's River North Correctional Center, whether it's Wallace Ridge, or whether it's Red Onion, and prisons have been abused, suspicious suicides, allegations of murder, etc., that has been repeatedly covered up. You can go online and pull up cases, civil cases, and civil suits, some of which I've provided, where there's incident after incident of incident where prisoners are brutalized, beaten, attacked, victims of canine dogs being beaten, ate up, and chewed up, and maimed, etc., with no real consequences. So now we appeal to the General Assembly and the Latina and Black caucus to do an investigation and fact finding. But that's been done before, and there's nothing that has really come out of it. We need people who are in the legal community, who are lawyers, who have human rights knowledge, etc., and is not afraid to challenge and expose the state, to go behind enemy lines and go into these institutions and talk to prisoners, to do fact finding, and to pursue litigation. Not litigation that's going to sell us out with consent decrees where the DOC promises to make changes and whatnot, and in 5 years, 10 years, everything goes back the same. We need a strategy that is systemic in its approach, comprehensive in its approach, and that is litigated within the court, that can go to trial and set precedent when these type of conditions of confinement can be ruled unconstitutional and human rights violation, and bring about concrete change. You know what I'm saying? Concrete change. And if you listen to the narrative of the DOC, even if we accept the narrative that they're stating, the spokesperson stated that these guys are setting themselves on fire because they want to get transferred, because they want to be sent to another prison. Okay, let's look at that for a minute. Let's say, just for the sake of is permanently disfiguring and scarring himself to be transferred to another prison. Not to be released from prison, you understand? Not to get parole, but to be moved to another prison. So what is it about that prison, condition wise, culture wise, that is so harsh and extreme that would make an individual disfigure himself or set himself on fire to be moved? That's the question. You know, I did 13 years of solitary confinement. That's 23 and 1. 23 hours and locked in a cell a day, let out only for an hour. Uh, this was in the state of Indiana. Constantly moved from one control unit of Supermax to another during that 13-year period. Uh, various levels of repression. You know, and the aim of this particular, like I said, these efforts is what they call social isolation, where you don't have any contact with other prisoners. You only have physical contact to some extent with guards, and that's when you handcuff the shackle, or they moving you from point A to point B, like from your cell to the shower or to the recreation area, which is usually just a larger cell. You know, sensory deprivation. A lot of times you're not allowed to have TV. You know what I'm saying? You're not allowed to see daylight. You don't have windows in the cell or whatnot. Sometimes you can't even tell if it's night or day outside. When the maximum control complex in Indiana first opened, there were we wasn't even allowed to have clocks in the pods. You understand? The officers wasn't allowed to even tell us the time of day if we asked what time it is. This is a matter of record. This was a matter of policy. If you go online and pull up the case, pull up the case, Taifa, Taifa versus Bayh, which was a class action lawsuit. After 30 of us filed individual lawsuits, and it was consolidated into a class action and was being represented by the People's Law Office out of Chicago, Illinois, and later ACLU, Indiana Civil Liberties Union. And they settled with, again, a bogus consent decree to bring about certain changes. So again, if you look at uh, the case out of Pelican Bay, out of California, the Gomez case, the lawsuit about the conditions of confinement out there, it's the same all over the country. And back in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and whatnot, there was a movement throughout the country under the guise of so-called get tough on crime and get control of prisons, where states across the country was developing supermax prisons. If you go online and pull up the committee there in the Marion lockdown, or Google Bonnie Kness and the work that she was doing through the American Friends Service Committee out of New Jersey around control unit prisons, supermax prisons, as well as look up the newsletter that they was publishing through the committee in Marion lockdown called Cold Storage. You will find an archive of a ton of information on these units, and you will see a pattern of, again, when prisons was being placed in refrigerated cells. We were not allowed to have any form of social contact. We were sensory deprived, etc., and submitted to behavior modification tactics. You understand? And a lot of us have been damaged, and people would be losing their minds. And now, if you fast forward to the 21st century, a lot more information has come out now. Science has come out now by experts like Dr. Terry Coopers, for example, out of California, a psychologist and expert on supermax prisons. Professor Craig Haney from California, another expert on supermax prisons and post-traumatic stress disease that come out of the torture that we've been subjected to in those prisons. And as a matter of fact, Dr. Cooper's just released a book called Solitary, where he's breaking down the science of the post-shoe release syndrome, the after effects that you have once you're released from SHU or released from prison, and how these after effects and these conditions continue to 2 years here, 3 years there, a year and a half here, you know, and and it has created a sense of trauma within myself in terms of audio hallucination sometimes, in terms of depression, in terms of anger, in terms of rage, in terms of nightmares, in terms of reliving the experience and the traumatization, and so forth. And the DLC has not been proactive on doing any type of treatment for those of us that have gone through that experience. You have people that have been submitted to solitary confinement for 10, 15, and 20 years under these conditions and then be allowed to drop to a lower security level. And there's no proactiveness from the mental health department or the administration to treat these individuals. I was released from solitary confinement after 13 years, kicked out of the state of Indiana, brought to Virginia, placed in general population, and put in another cell with another man when I had never been double cell for any length of time. You understand? And when I approached the mental health department saying, hey, I just did 13 years of solitary, I've never been double cell before, I'm having issues of rage, anger, depression, stress, I'm not used to loud noise, being around a lot of people, I need to gradually be uh, processed, and I need some help. I couldn't get none. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't get no help. And I was looked at like, well, what is he talking about? What do he want? What do he need? What do he want? Some medication or something? What can we do? And it was dismissed. Now, if I would have reacted violently or had an episode or whatnot, they would have put on the news, inmate does such and such and such and such. But nobody would have knew the backstory that here they had me in the solitary confinement for 13 years and put me in this particular type of situation. So what part of rehabilitation or re-entry is that? And the other side of that is, what about those of us that's coming home to our communities with this type of traumatization and this experience to come back into communities that's going through their own crisis, whether it's violence, whether it's economical depression, whether it's police on rampages or whatnot. What about those individuals that's coming back to the community untreated with these particular issues? Who takes responsibility for that? And who takes responsibility for when you have an episode, you understand, when that particular individual creates harm or damage or whatnot within that community, and now you want to put on the news that he's an ex-convict or he's an ex-felon or that he should have never been let out of prison. You understand? Self-serving opportunism. You know what I'm saying? But no accountability for the Department of Corrections, you understand, or the system or the criminal justice system itself.
Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah, and just to sum up, like I'm in prison after a situation where my son was murdered after I had got out of prison after 10 years. When I had only been home for 10 months, going to college, going to school full time, working full time, traveling around the country, speaking at colleges and universities about prison reforms and what have you, on various panels and college panels and organization panels, and being active in my community, basically trying to rebuild my life and get my life together. And my son was murdered, and as I'm laying here watching his body on the streets, you understand, by being surrounded by laughing cops and former COs who knew you, and rightly so. But you do not want to. But you do not want to give the same respect and honor to those like ourselves who've been through the criminal justice system. You understand, and submitted and subjected to the same thing. How is that rational? That's pretty much all I want to say. I just want people to understand that, yeah, we talking about red onion and Wallace Ridge, etc. But this is an issue that's systemic throughout the United States, you understand? And it's something that needs to be addressed, especially long-term solitary confinement, the psychological impact, the post-stress impact, you understand? And the lack of proactiveness in terms of mental health treatment. You understand? Real mental health treatment for those that's been subjected to these type of conditions and this type of trauma.